Ladies and gentlemen, this is internet personality Vangelus, and the leader Pricepoint made a loud and publicized return to Transformers Generations in 2014 with Jetfire, whose particular accessory options timed curiously with Hasbro's quashing of a Harmony Gold legal action over things that kinda resemble the Robotech. Jetfire also debuted very briefly in Canada for around $30 Canadian in Walmart rollback aisles across this great nation, possibly due to a computer error, possibly due to a very generous and random set of circumstances. Either way, I got one before he went back to being $60, and it's time to video review this proto-cultured Cybertronian scientist. I don't know a whole lot about legitimate real-life jets or Shoji Kawamori's Macross line art, but Jetfire's alt mode is a sexy piece of fictional aerodynamics as far as I'm concerned. All those sweeping lines, all that bountiful nose cone. This guy manages to fit a modern North American budget by featuring mostly just red paint on his otherwise unpainted white jet body, with crimson stripes all over the place, along with outlining and coloration around the cockpit and on the nose cone. The shape of the front of the jet mode is simply gorgeous, and the translucent cockpit hatch can actually open to reveal a Macross-ish two-seat ensemble within. Also, guess what? The wings can sweep back and forth, and the vertical tail fins can waggle up and down. And there's fold-away front landing gear! Huzzah! By the way, there is a bunch of robot junk under the topside sexiness of Jetfire's alt mode, but it clings tightly to the bottom, forming a very decent undercarriage for a jet-forming transformer, if you're looking at it from the side. Anyway, this is Jetfire. There are robotechnical connotations. He's got add-on parts, and they are chromed up in a gaudy vac metal red that, according to a Hasbro rep at Toy Fair, represents extra collector value. I think it looks like a pile of cheesy fingerprint magnet nonsense, but I've got to admit that in person it's slightly less obnoxious than I expected, and so far has been far more durable than I'd feared. All the gun parts plug in with 5mm ports, with the main cannon sticking out ridiculously unsubtly from beneath the nose cone, while the fast packs tab in with C-clips to finish things off. It looks pretty cool, unmistakably Jetfire. Still too chromy for my tastes, but if it really bugs me, I could get the Japanese version, or engage in crazy chemical experimentation to strip the chrome off of the red plastic base. By the way, this giant dumb 5-barreled gun formation? Official. Oh yes, I almost forgot, the gun has a spring-loaded missile. It's a bit of a hair trigger, but check it out. Ooh. Anyway, you can leave the armor on while you transform him if you want, but for the sake of avoiding giant red lens flares, I'm stripping Jetfire down before we hit up his robot mode. On paper, this transformation involves a fake cockpit chest and has all 4 limbs entirely visible on the jet's underbelly before you even begin. Yet, the process of transformation involves every major piece doing some kind of major motion and ends up rather satisfying by the end, in part thanks to a load of tabs and slots for just about everything. Given the fact that his center mass includes both a faked cockpit and a differently shaped fake cockpit window and nose cone, the action of unfurling and refolding its accordion-hinged connection to the rest of the toy makes for a fun start and lovely finish to the conversion process. Just don't forget to fold down that tail fin assembly. I have, several times. Mixing a bevy of source materials into a sort of sky-fired and Macrossed pastiche, Generations Jetfire is a tall and handsome robot with very slender legs, big pod-like shoulders, and a hardcore mess of folded wing mass all over his back. Despite all that integrated backpackery, which includes the entire cockpit and nose cone of the alt mode along his spine, Jetfire comes off looking well-proportioned and even a little sleek, mostly from frontal angles, thanks to the strong shapes of his limbs and the vented slopes of his flanks. There's a bunch of silver-painted circuitry surrounding the sculpted Autobot symbol beneath his more squared-off faux cockpit window, and it's a crying shame that the badge lacks any white to make it pop out from beneath its translucent blue shell. Jetfire's head sculpt is stoic, small-faced, and surprisingly handsome, with silver paint bringing it to life from within the larger helmet of his skull structure. Jetfire can hold the main nose cone gun from his jet mode, and if you really want to, you can keep a white piece of armor stored along its body. This looks patently ridiculous, as though the gun were being belched out of a disembodied Valkyrie face, but that also makes it kind of endearing to me? Anyway, you can fully armor Jetfire up with all his red chrome business in this mode too. The underslung wing guns now cover the weird semi-hollow parts of his forearms, which is helpful, and those leg pieces you can just leave attached. They cling onto the same chunks of rear landing gear wheeled shin stuff. That weird white armor part is a straight-up Macross-style faceplate that makes surprisingly clever use of his existing helmet sculpt to look like a proper Skull Squadron leader. The overall effect is intense, and in general, I love being able to armor up a Transformer, but the fast packs do stick up kind of far, so if you want to, you can rotate them back down to hug a little more tightly and flush to his overall shape and silhouette. And I guess thrust him downwards if something's trying to suck him up. And you can do that dumb 5-part Gestalt gun. You really can. Do it. Give it a try. Put it in his hand. Tell me what it was like. I've stripped Jetfire down to his scientist mode for this part of the review because I find all the chrome distracting, and I want to talk about his joints, like how his head joint is a simple swivel left and right, but to look up and down, he's got a hinge inside his head, so as you can see, like this detailed neck sculpt, and that's kind of cool. Like, there's no tilt, but it's that design I'm seeing more and more often now of two separate hinges, and I think it's a decent compromise when you don't want to have like just a big ball socket thing up there for whatever reason. His shoulders, pretty lovely ratchets forward and backwards. Just a nice solid friction joint outwards. There's a bicep swivel on a big old mushroom peg, and then his elbows are their own ratchet setup. They bend just over 90 degrees in, and I think they look pretty fine. Unfortunately, he has no wrist swivel, and it's kind of a bummer because I kind of don't really see why there wouldn't be one. There's nothing on this design that seems to be actively preventing it, so I think it's just a parts count budget thing, and that's a shame. He also has no waist joint, but that's entirely because of the transformation. I don't see how one could have really been fit into this scheme very easily. His hips, hella ratchet. Unfortunately, he can't kick forward super far. He ends up banging into his skirt hip chunk. But it's alright. I can live with it as long as he can get his leg forward enough to look like it's, you know, forward. And his knee is soft detent that's practically like magic fingers vibrating when you use it. I like it a lot. It's also a thigh swivel on another big old mushroom peg that you can totally see from here. And his feet can go, due to the transformation, forward and backwards a little bit. Not really forwards that much, but if you use the double hinge, you can get them out here a little bit more if you choose. I kind of like messing around with the double hinge a little bit and kind of finding a medium point where I feel like he can stand a little bit naturally but not have too much bell-bottom effect. And he stands really well. He's got like that cut so that he can have an akimbo stance without too much trouble. And yeah, I like his posability. It's not super posable, it's not mind-blowing, but much like Brainstorm, he's got enough of the basic parts and they work well enough that I feel satisfied with him as far as moving all his joints around. I'll get this part out of the way once and for all. I don't like the chrome, but it's not as terrible as I had been fearing ever since it was first announced and confirmed. It's fine. I'll survive. There aren't giant flakes of shiny red stuff all over my floor, and I'm happy about that. Chrome aside, Jetfire is a generally solid and fun toy, large enough to look substantial, and including enough play value in his armor parts and transformations to leave me fairly satisfied. Thing is, I paid $30 for mine. At $45, $50, or even $60, depending on the cruelty of your local Toys R Us, I find that Jetfire just lacks that classic leader price point value I had grown accustomed to. For a variety of reasons, but a major one is he's just not very dense and a little bit light. It's like going out to buy a familiar cake and finding an entire layer missing beneath the icing. Today's leader Transformers feel more like yesterday's Ultra Transformers, at least to me. I'd say Jetfire is worth your consideration, but also worth your patience in finding some kind of deal on him. Anyway, this has been Internet Personality Vangelus, and if you aren't a Jetfire fan, but do like the look of this toy, have I got good news for you. I just hope you like Seekers, fella.